I've got a dozen college football and NFL trends for you guys that are active this weekend. They are a combined 112-0, and we are going to get right into them. And as always, I start by saying, please never make a bet based on any single trend. These trends that I'm giving you are just one trend in each game, and there are many trends that are active for each game. If you're going to use trends as part of your handicapping process, I recommend that you go through all of the relevant, or what you feel are the relevant trends for each game, and weigh them out to see if they weigh out more heavily on one side or the other. For our first trend of the week here, we're going to go to college football first. We're going to look at Stanford. We're going to go back to the 2021 season, and we're going to look at them when they are off back-to-back games where they had 125 or less rushing yards. So previous rushing yards less than or equal to 125, and previous rushing yards less than or equal to 125. We'll hit the STQL button. And you can see that Stanford is 0-8 against the spread in this situation, losing to the spread by nearly 9 points per game on average. I love those margins that are above a touchdown. And you can see that this is active on Friday with Stanford visiting Colorado. Let's roll right on into trend number 2. And we're going to look at James Madison. We're going to go back to last season, and we're going to look at them when they are off an ATS win, against the spread win. So previous game was an against the spread win. So it doesn't necessarily mean they won the game. It just means they covered the spread. We'll hit the STQL button. You can see that the over-under is 8-0, 8 overs, no unders. These games went over by an average of 13.5 points per game. You can look in the right-hand column here under overtime. You can see that there were no overtime games in this query. So that margin is legit, 13.5 points per game. And you can see that this is active on Saturday, James Madison hosting Georgia Southern. So let's go right on into trend number 3. And for this one, we're going to look at Oregon State. And we're going to look at Oregon State going back to the 21 season when they are at home and they are off a road game. So previous game was away. We'll hit the STQL button. You can see that Oregon State is 9-0 straight up and against the spread, covering the spread by more than 10 points per game on average. Love that. And you can see that this is active on Saturday, Oregon State hosting UCLA. Let's go right into trend number 4. And guys, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. I would greatly appreciate that. For trend number 4, we're going to look at Ball State. We're going to go again back to the 21 season. And we're going to look at them when they're coming off a conference loss. So previous game was a conference loss. We'll hit the STQL button. And you can see that the over-under is 0-9. No overs, 9 unders. These games stayed under by more than 12 points per game on average. Love that margin. And you can see that this is active on Saturday, Ball State hosting Toledo. Let's go to trend number 5. For trend number 5, we're going to look at Dana Holgorsen as the coach at Houston when they're at home, and their previous game saw 60 or more total points scored. So their previous points plus their previous opponent's points greater than or equal to 60. We'll hit the STQL button. You can see that Holgorsen's Cougars are 0-10 against the spread in this situation, losing on average by nearly 12 points per game against the spread. And you can see that this is active tonight as I record this on Thursday morning. So if you're watching this in time, this is active today on Thursday with Houston hosting West Virginia. So that brings me to the final college football trend for this week. And guys, if you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up to like this video. I would greatly appreciate that. We're going to look at Coach Matt Campbell when he was a coach at Iowa State. They are an away dog or a road underdog. And the line is less than or equal to 7, so they're a road underdog of 7 points or less. We'll hit the SDQL button. And Campbell's Cyclones are 0-9 over under, no overs, 9 unders. Look at this margin. These games stayed under by more than 18.5 points per game on average. We've got some really low scoring. The average score is Iowa State 16.9, opponents 18.8. We've got some really low scoring games here. Total was 60, and they only scored 36 total points. Total was 65.5. They only had 41. There, they only scored 16 total points. Last time this was active was against Iowa last season. They only put up 17 total points. You can see that this is active on Saturday. Iowa State visiting Cincinnati. So we are going to mosey on over now to the NFL side of things, which means we're going to go to the top here and click on NFL. NFL SDQL query. And for trend number 1 in the NFL, we're going to look at the 49ers. We're going to go back to last season. And we're going to look at them when they are off back-to-back games where they scored 25 or more points. So previous points greater than or equal to 25 and previous points greater than or equal to 25. We'll hit the SDQL button. And you can see the Niners are a perfect 7-0 straight up and against the spread, covering the spread by a nearly 10 points per game average. Love that. And you can see that this is active on Sunday with the Niners visiting the Cleveland Browns. So let's move into the second NFL trend. And for this one, guys, if you want me to look up any other trends or situational angles that might be active for this weekend's games, let me know in the comments. If you have any trends that you found that are active for any of this weekend's games, drop those in the comments as well. We would all love to see them. For our second NFL trend, we're going to look at the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to go back to last season when they're a favorite, and the line is less than or equal to -4. So that means that they were favored by 4 points or more. We'll hit the SDQL button. You can see that the over-under is 0-9, no overs, 9 unders. These games stayed under by an average of about 10.7 points per game, and that is even including an overtime game here from earlier this season when they played the Colts a few weeks ago. And you can see that this is active on Sunday, the Ravens against the Titans. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the line right now is Ravens -4. And that's our parameter. So it's right on the edge right now. So if this line drops to Ravens -3.5, this trend will become inactive. So this is a great place for me to remind you guys that whenever you run a query that includes a line parameter or a total parameter, you have to make sure that those lines and totals stay within that range, or else the trends become inactive. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to move to NFL trend number 3. For this one, we're going to look at the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to go back to the 2021 season. And we're going to look at them when their previous opponent gained 400 or more total yards. So obviously the Cowboys coming off a lousy defensive effort. See how they've responded. We'll click the SDQL button. You can see that the Cowboys are a perfect 9-0 straight up and against the spread, covering the spread by basically 2 touchdowns a game. Love that margin. You can see the average score in these games: Cowboys 33.7, opponents 14.6. And this is active on Monday night when the Cowboys visit the Chargers. So let's go right to trend number 4 in the NFL. And guys, just a reminder, you can get my football trend report right here on this channel every Thursday. Probably a good time to also announce that once the basketball season kicks off, I will go back to doing daily videos, as I will have a daily basketball trend report as well. So definitely something to look out for. It's kind of stinks right now because baseball is down to the last few teams. There's just not enough active trends to make a video worthwhile. And besides that, the postseason is a completely different animal than the regular season. So I don't really use too much SDQL in my handicapping in the playoffs. So that's why I haven't done any baseball videos recently. So right now, at least for another week here and probably another week or two thereafter, you'll only see a video for me on a Thursday for football. That will change once basketball gets into full swing. So for this next trend, let's look at the Washington Commanders. Let's go back to the 2020 season, and we'll look at them when they're on a streak. It says less than or equal to -3. So because that's a negative number, that means it's a losing streak. So their losing streak is actually, it says less than, but because it's a negative number, it actually means longer than. So this is the Commanders since 2020 when they are on a losing streak of at least 3 games. And we'll hit the SDQL button. And you can see that the over-under is 0-10, no overs, 10 unders. These games stayed under by an average of about 9.5 points per game. Love any margin that's over a touchdown. And you can see that this is active on Sunday, the Commanders visiting the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go to NFL trend number 5. And for this one, we're going to look at the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to go back to September 26th of 2021. And we're going to look at the Cardinals when they are facing an opponent that is averaging, this is basically saying opponents average, opponents turnovers, less than or equal to 1. So this is when their opponents are averaging, how do I say this? Their opponent is forcing 1 or less turnovers per game. So it's a defense that doesn't, when they're facing a defense that basically does not force a lot of turnovers. We'll hit the SDQL button. You can see that the Cardinals are 10-2, despite an average line of +1. They're 10-2 straight up, winning by an average of 8.75 points a game. They're 12-0 against the spread, covering the spread by 9.7 points per game on average. And you can see that this is active on Sunday with the Cardinals visiting their division rival, the Rams. Now, I would ignore the other 4 games that it's showing that this is going to be active because we don't know in the future if these 4 teams will be, at that point, will be averaging more than forcing one or more turnovers a game. So we don't know that yet. So we can't assume 3 weeks from now that this is still going to be active. We'll have to wait and see. So that brings me to the 6th and final NFL trend for this week. And we're going to look at the New Orleans Saints. We're going to go back to the 2020 season. And we're going to look when their previous opponent's score after the second quarter was less than or equal to 3. So that basically means the Saints in their previous game held their opponent to 3 points or less in the first half. And overtime equals 0 means the game didn't go overtime, and I'll explain why I added that in just a minute. But we'll hit the SDQL button. You can see that the over-under is 0-12. No overs, 12 unders. These games stayed under by 8 2/3 points per game on average. You can see It doesn't show that it's active on Sunday, and here's why. And it's because I added this overtime equals 0, because the system doesn't, we don't know at this point if Sunday's game is going to go overtime or not. So if I remove the overtime parameter, now you can see that this is active on Sunday, the Saints at the Texans. That also makes this, now it's not 0-12 over under, it's now 1-12 over under, because if you look down here, there was one overtime game that went over the total, and it only went over the total because the game went overtime. The total for the game was 42.5, and it was 21-21 at the end of regulation. So the game was under by a half a point at the end of regulation. It went over in overtime. So that's why I added the overtime equals 0 parameter. But make no mistake about it, this trend is active this week. The Saints at the Texans. And again, if we add the overtime parameter, you can see that it is 0-12 over under, assuming no overtime this Sunday. This will be active. And that, guys, is going to do it for this week's football trend report. Again, if you've got any trends or situational stuff you want me to look up for this weekend's game, drop them in the comments. I will get to them when I can. If you found any trends or angles for this weekend's games, drop them in the comments as well. We would all love to see them. And as always, guys, best of luck on all of your wagers this weekend.